So for those of you who were here when I spoke last time, we presented our last case, what we're asking is that the council ensure all catering at internal meetings and events is plant-based, which is an important and necessary step in addressing the climate crisis. It's a simple ask and a small task, but to understand why it's important, we definitely need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture a little bit. This year, we've seen a record-breaking cyclone in southeastern Africa, wildfires in Chile and Canada, unbearable heat waves across Asia, and powerful ice storms in the southern United States as well. Environmental experts predict that at our current rate of collective inaction, the world could be facing a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise within the next 10 years. So it's happening now and it's happening soon. Current scientific consensus points to meat and dairy production as the leading cause of climate breakdown. The livestock sector in particular accounts for 14% of all global greenhouse gas emissions, and animal farming and fishing are the leading cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss globally. Now, in London, 27% of food emissions come from meat, while it provides only 5% of the volume of food that's actually consumed. Per calorie and gram of protein that's produced, meat and dairy produce many times more emissions than plant foods. It's all stuff I covered already, but just reiterating, of course. In the UK, approximately 85% of agricultural land is used for farming animals and growing their feed. 40% of the UK's arable land is used just to grow animal feed. Of all the cereals eaten in the UK, 40% are eaten by people, and almost 60% are just fed to animals. Animal grazing and land clearing has devastated our natural landscape and continues to be the source of harmful emissions and pollution. It only makes sense that to reduce emissions and reverse the devastation of our landscape, we must move towards plant-based foods. Recent studies have confirmed this as well, showing that the least sustainable plant-based diet was more environmentally friendly than the most sustainable meat-eater diet in terms of emission, in terms of water, in terms of land use. Whether they're imported or grown locally, that's something we often hear, but it's just a complete misnomer, or produced using conventional or organic methods. It's all exactly the same. A shift to plant-based eating in high-income nations could cut those nations' agricultural emissions by 61%, free up land as well that could be returned to nature, could sequester carbon from the atmosphere. This change in land use would also benefit wildlife. It could allow for our precious ecosystems to flourish, our biodiversity to bounce back as well. Now, this is also obviously stuff that we've looked into in our research, but this is reflected by Camden itself. The Camden Carbon Scenario to 2030, Achieving a Zero Carbon Camden report, says that solutions to achieving net zero could be achieved by adopting more land-efficient diets that would then free up land for rewilding with trees. Camden residents themselves could therefore play a role in this in their dietary adjustments. This is your guys' words, not necessarily ours. The Government Commission National Food Strategy also recommended meat consumption should be reduced by up to 30% or more to help food security for future generations. And the government's Independent Climate Change Committee recommended that public bodies should lead the way by promoting plant-based foods. Now, in other countries as well, they've taken major steps recently, such as South Korea and Denmark. They've announced action plans to radically transform their food systems through plant-based foods. And many councils in the UK have done exactly the same to commit to fully plant-based catering, which is what we're asking you guys to do today. The solutions are really, really clear. A move away from meat and dairy is absolutely necessary for the council and the country to achieve net zero targets, something that we're utterly failing on right now. It will prevent further deforestation and halt biodiversity loss. What we need now is effective modelling and leadership from local authorities, from Camden Council. All you guys could do this, absolutely. And if you commit to serving 100% plant-based fare at internal meetings and events, that's the modelling behaviour that could lead the way. When residents hear about this, if they come to internal meetings and events, they'll be able to see the importance of taking up plant-based eating habits themselves. We'll be normalising plant-based eating for everybody, and we'll encourage residents to take action to prevent climate breakdown and protect nature as much as possible. There are a few issues with this that have been raised. I'm going to address them one by one. The first is in inclusion. Now, I think this is where the plant-based diet absolutely flourishes. Plant-based catering takes away any guesswork for people who might have any number of motivations for not eating certain foods, such as religion, such as culture, animal, environmental, or health concerns, providing an array of food options that everyone can eat, while saying that if someone wants to bring in their own food, that's fine, but the ones we provide, everybody is able to eat, will allow attendees to feel more comfortable with the changes that are there on the menu and allow them to lead the way in showcasing how we can change the climate one action at a time. Also, in terms of nutrition, it's evident, obviously, people with plant-based diets or non-plant-based diets could be very healthy, could also be very unhealthy, depending on the foods you choose. As the NHS, the British Association for Nutrition and Dietetics, state, The exact quote is, "A whole foods plant-based diet is perfectly healthy for all stages of life." That was 5 minutes. That's okay. Do you mind if I just do the last one? Because it's something we addressed in the meeting last time. The last one is in terms of cost. Though issues of cost have been raised in the past, this is often entirely based on the meat substitutes that people sometimes see in restaurants. Of course, if you're going to compare a chicken burger to a plant-based chicken burger, there's discrepancies because of supply and demand. Yet for our purposes in Camden Council, supplying sustainable, affordable catering to people at our meetings and events, it's obvious to note that the cheapest supermarket staples, pasta, rice, potatoes, lentils, vegetables, beans, are far less expensive than those foods that are in the meat and fish aisle. Lastly, I just want to say in terms of appeal, plant-based catering is super necessary, though it might seem a small change in isolation. Addressing the catering we provide at Camden Council is vital in showcasing how we can be an enormous part of the change that is so essential to our collective survival. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I don't think there's anything in there I disagree with.
Amazing.
Yeah, I agree. We need to take drastic action now, and this is a small ask. So I'm completely on board. If it was up to me, it's something we'd definitely do straight away. So hopefully we can do that. We'll see what everyone else thinks too. I think it's interesting because obviously COP28, there's been some positives and some negatives going on, as there always is at every conference for parties. But I thought what was particularly interesting, just off the back of your deputation too, is how methane emissions are particularly bad for a warming planet. And therefore a plant-based diet would be one way of addressing that. Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, in her speech, she called for a global methane agreement. And again, like moving towards a plant-based diet where we can, again, is in line with that, kind of being more drastic around doing more to stop our planet from warming to basically, which will result in our extinction. So I think it's a simple ask to make. So thank you for coming here today. Appreciate it. And I thought your deputation before at the council was really good and powerful too. And you guys held up your sign. I thought it was, yeah, good. So thank you.
Appreciate it. I guess not a question really, but I guess supportive of the centre of this. There's still so much more to do on food on a global basis and on a UK basis, and the UK government seems to be missing in action on any action on green issues. I mean, I was at Parliament yesterday, and one other bit, it was just wouldn't say agree to any green policies at all. So I feel this is probably a big challenge to us as local authorities to step up. That being said, I'm very conscious of budgetary impacts on us at the moment, given what we're facing 13 plus years of austerity now, and budgetary constraints are really tight. So I think what we do, when agree to do, we should do it on a sort of trial, properly explored basis. I'm sure deputation would hopefully agree with that. I don't want to risk impacting on any other critical council services. So maybe something on a trial basis with, actually, I must say, like being a councillor, introduce you to intermittent fasting, whether you like it or not, because I don't think we eat very often, and certainly not well, because you are often in meetings late on. So I think maybe something to challenge our schools teams or events teams to have a look at what are the options to do this and what the cost implications would be. So fully supportive in principle, but I just think I want to make sure that we don't have any inadvertent extra costs and something. I appreciate some parts are cheaper, but overall I want to make sure it's a feasible thing to do.
I mean, yeah, well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was wondering in terms of my response, should that be after the 5 minutes, or can I sort of
back and forth?
Okay, fantastic. I just wanted to say, before I carry on as well, the lovely Kevin, just if you any more convincing, he's prepared some plant-based treats for everyone.
I was actually joking when I asked.
So we have a blueberry cake, we have some peppermint meringues, we have some apricot tart. So we appreciate you guys work very, very hard, and you probably don't eat that often. So if you needed any more convincing, there's some amazing treats. Kevin, you can hand them.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. The great British.
Yeah. There's some serious bribery going on here. That's a treat. But there's also serious points as well. So obviously we provided some ideally delicious food, but I wanted to address the cost concerns, Rishi, that you brought up. So a little bit I missed out just in terms of time. It's going to be very distracting.
It's going to be sticking pictures.
A poor Hollywood handshake.
I want to convince Parliament as well. Maybe we'll convince everyone, but I don't know.
So much, Kevin.
Also, that has to be one save for me as well. I just want to say, so in terms of cost, something that I missed out was I think Cambridge City Council made the full switch to being plant-based, and they conducted research afterwards in terms of what the differences were. Research was that there was absolutely no difference in terms of how it impacted the budget, what the cost was in terms of plant-based versus non-plant-based. So I feel like sometimes we can get worried about cost, but actually a council that has done this and then researched it afterwards has found there's absolutely no difference. In fact, they found, I think, it saved the money if you look at the report, it's adaptation.
Just ingredients. What's this made of?
Kevin? I have absolutely no idea.
So that is typical pack. So with red crust, butter, we have the allergens. And then there's a layer of jam, and then there's the frangipan, which has raspberries. I'm not entirely sure what the other ones, so that part of that. But yeah,
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Delicious.
Hopefully a good example how we can change what we're eating and we don't lose anything. We still have the same amazing flavour. The cost actually isn't that much different if we look at the Cambridge City example.
Yeah.
This has a massive impact on the climate. And it's just so powerful in showing people this is something you can do in your own homes. When you come to Camden, we're providing sustainable, environmentally friendly food. I think that could be just really powerful for people. Go on, sorry.
So January is coming up in January anyway. And then on Rishi's point about trialling it, that'd be a good time if we were to kind of make that turnaround quick enough. I'm not sure how it works for officers to decide, but that would be a kind of a good way to start this off.
Matthew, then Sharon.
So I think I actually am quite sympathetic to this, but can you help with why, if we're approaching this from an environmental angle rather than an ethical veganism angle, the correct ask isn't a 30% reduction in meat in catering?
I think it's just about modelling. If we're asking people on the top level, oh, can we reduce a little bit? Then people are going to go, okay, based on that, I'm going to reduce a little bit less than what they say, and like it trickles down to kind of absolutely nothing. I feel like we just have to be strong in our principles. Yes, we're not coming at it from an ethical standpoint. Of course, that's something I do believe, but I don't think that's what we're here today to discuss. But I think in terms of the environment, we've seen that it can create drastic change in other councils around the UK. So I think if we say we're absolutely committing to plant-based foods in total and still giving people, like we said, the choice to bring in their own food, I think that'll have a massive and very powerful effect. I think in any sort of example, and there's a lot of economic research about this, if you say, oh, we're going to give you sort of 30% off this, people are much less motivated than you say, if you do this, the next thing is free, 100%. Much more powerful, I think, to go full rather than a little bit of a percentage.
I think I agree with what Rishi was saying about trialling it and obviously looking at the cost. And I also wondered why you're approaching it from the health point of view as well. However, I know that I'm a long-term vegetarian, not vegan, and became one in the 80s when you didn't have the offering that you. So I learnt to cook Mediterranean food, Southeast Asian food. I didn't replace meat and 2 veg with 2 veg and a pack of something. And I worry with veganuary sometimes as well that people are thinking that they're eating extremely healthily when actually they're just packing in bad fats in the same way they would be if they were eating cheaply produced meat. So for me, if we did commit to this, it would have to be health driven and education driven rather than just go plant-based and just think that everything you eat is really healthy because it's not got meat in it, because patently that's not correct at the moment.
Totally. I would just say I think sometimes we fall into the trap of saying that if someone is plant-based, well, they need to be really careful in terms of where they get their nutrients. But if they're not plant-based, you're fine. And we know that's just not true at all. Whoever you are, you need to be aware of where your vitamins come from. We're not going to get enough vitamin D in the UK ever, let's be honest. So quite a nice idea to take a vitamin D supplement. And it's so important to be aware of where all our nutrients come from, whatever our diet is. And I kind of think there should be education for whatever your diet is in terms of if you're doing veganuary or you're not. So I do agree with you, but I think sometimes that's a little trap that we can fall into where one's fine and one absolutely isn't. I think we know that not to be the case.
I'm also the Cabinet Advisor for Child Hunger, and we're doing a lot of work with schools on why they're not taking up free school meals. And it's about, sometimes it'll be about cultural taste, sometimes it's chicken chops better, sometimes it's all sorts of cultural reasons. But I think if we were to take veganism into schools or plant-based food into schools, there has to be co-production with the children. We can't just impose that on them. So where you can in this situation, I think you would have to work very closely with the kids and talk to them about, not you, obviously, us, about their health, education, why we're doing it.
Yeah,
and it would have to be very, very, very tasty.
Yeah, I totally agree. I worked in primary schools for a long time with some children who are pupil premium and on free school meals. I totally understand the struggle, and it's very tricky. I think there's a lot of very complicated issues at heart there, and if this were to be something that goes to schools, I think it needs to be pitched really correctly and needs to address issues in terms of the cost of living crisis and what people can afford. But as I sort of go back to earlier, often some of the kind of supermarket staples that can actually really help people who have very, very little are often plant-based, whether that's a massive batch of lentils or pasta or whatever it is, in order to feed a large group of people on little cost. I think it can be helpful.
That's great if you can afford the fuel to boil them. They are incredibly cheap, but very, very fuel expensive to boil and quite expensive to buy in tins ready. So it's that. I know where you're coming from, and I'm not disagreeing with you. There are so many things that have to be thought about, and I think Councillor Umedi, when she made the cost point, I think, was it last time or the time before?
Both times.
That is absolutely it. I know how long it takes to boil a pan of chickpeas, and I know I can have bucket loads of them if I keep boiling them. But you just watch your dial go up and up and up and up. So I think at the moment it's brilliant, but it's an aspiration at home really for the people, for the middle classes.
Possibly. I personally would disagree with that as someone who I came from a background of privilege, but I personally don't earn a lot of money at all. And I would say that I know a lot of people who are vegan or plant-based on a budget, and people who do have a lot of spare cash. It depends sort of what your income is, but I totally appreciate things to be very difficult for certain people. I think that isn't really the issue that we're discussing today, though. I appreciate that is maybe an extension of what we're discussing. In terms of, I go back to what the councillor over here said about we should do something when we can. The bottom line is we can. We're in we're one of the, whatever we think about budgets, we're one of the richest councils that there are. And actually, we're in London where there's so many vegan options readily available all over, So I kind of think that we have the ability to lead the way in terms of what we're providing here, showcase excellent plant-based food to our residents. And I feel like we can do it, so why aren't we? We know the science is really clear, so we should act.
There is no rich council at the moment. I mean, tragically, a number of our peers are looking at Section 140. I think we have to be really conscious that that's why I think any thought, and I love the point on schools and thinking that through, because the worst thing that happens is that they then switch and the kids all go to the chicken shop because it's cheaper. That would be the worst outcome for health and for us. So I think let's explore both the options. I think our events and stuff. And even things like just making a default option, how the fair trade banana became like, the de facto staple. Let's use behavioural science and models that work. Banning things for the sake of it just gives other people an excuse to start getting angry. And actually there's a sort of a shift and a pattern thing here. But I think certainly maybe through you, Chair, we make a recommendation that we ask the events team to explore this as a default option, and the schools to see what the feasibility and what they think the impacts on the children will be on behaviour. If we're going to do this, let's do it properly rather than something sort of flippant.
This is probably a question for officers rather than, well, it is a question for officers rather than for you, but who does cater internal meetings and events, and how many are there? And are we talking about finger food, or are there proper meals catered? I haven't eaten extensively at any meeting.
This isn't the biggest meal I've had yet. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, it's not just things like, for example, an event down the Claudia Jones room or something like that. There is quite a few bits of catering on that varies. Yeah, so I think that's why let's challenge the events team and the schools teams to have a conversation about this, and then actually
different caterers are used for every event. That's what from what I've seen. I went to a Black History Month event in October, and it was all kind of, it was food from different caterers, direct caterers. So I don't think there is like one caterer, or so it just depends on what the event is, who's organising the event, why they're organising it. So unless we're saying we should have a policy in place,
I need to pick meetings more carefully. That's what that means. But the practicalities of this are quite difficult to follow, actually, advice on that, along the way from the events team, because
unless it's an internally organised event by the then we could potentially put the policy. But if it's an externally organised event, it'd be a bit more difficult. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, make your point. No, Matthew.
No, I agree with you.
Can't we push for it to be the default? Because it's quite a simple ask. Obviously, schools is a different point, but this is just for events. I think that's not like something we could really try and push for. That our internal and our external events are plant-based.
Or just ask the events to come up with what is, I just don't know. I don't run events.
Yeah, and then talk to events about it, and then if there's more.
I mean, there's lots of weddings. Sorry, go on.
Just saying, it's like a final point. It does feel like, and COP28 was mentioned, but it feels like the kind of big plant-based elephant in the room of some of these things. It's like an enormous contributor to climate change, one of the biggest. We mentioned methane.
Yeah, but not necessarily in every country.
Also globally, I mean, if cows were a country, they would have the third biggest emissions globally. I think only behind China and India, who have very as well. So kind of often, at COP28, report that no coffee stand was serving any plant-based milk at all, and you're a bit like, these places should be leading the way and showing this is how we can change our food systems and be part of progressive change for everybody. And I feel like it isn't an enormous ask that if there are events and we can work with the events team, like you said, we can just say, this is what you can do. Everyone who comes to Camden can see this is what you can do in your home if you have the availability to do it, to lead the way in climate action. And I kind of feel like we should always be addressing that as much as possible where we can in showcasing the best that we can do.
Let's get the officers to respond. I've got a note here telling me who's going to respond. Is it Richard? Hi, Richard. You've got 5 minutes.
Yes. Hiya. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Sam, for your deputation. I'm sorry I'm not in the room, particularly to be sharing the treats with you. But yes, just setting the broader context, I guess. Camden's food mission is working to ensure that by 2030, everyone eats well every day with nutritious, affordable, sustainable food. And the mission comprises of 4 big outcomes. So residents are food secure and don't need to access crisis food provision. Food is a foundation of children's and young people's flourishing lives. Camden's food system contributes to tackling the climate crisis, and residents eat a healthy and balanced diet. The mission includes running public awareness campaigns to encourage more climate-friendly diets, including the recent Camden and Re-London Eat Like Londoner campaign, which is now live in bus stops and social media, and specifically takes sort of planet-friendly meals to its heart. In terms of food procurement, Camden's food mission seeks to ensure that food procured by the council promotes the provision of sustainable and healthy food. So with regards to the Camden Event Service, which has been discussed in the deputation and round the table, currently the service works on a 50% provision of meat-free options, with vegan and gluten-free options which are included in this. Don't allow pork products for any menu. They concentrate on only meat being chicken, which has to be halal. There are some fish and prawn options within sort of mixed bread and sandwiches. They always provide fresh fruits. On the point that was made about if you do buy catering through the events team and are putting on an event, various caterers, as the chair highlighted, can be used. So you can bring in your own caterer if that's what you're looking for when you're running an event in Camden. But we do have a specific caterer if you're asking for us to cater for, and that if you're planning a fully plant-based or meat-free event, or that's what you're looking for, that can be brought in if that's how you're planning your event. So there is a broad range available. The Camden food buying standards, though, builds on this work, and it's emerged as a priority through the food mission. So developing a set of standards will give Camden the opportunity to take a food systems approach to the food purchased by the council, so we can positively influence changes across health, environment, social and economic domains, and ensure that food is nutritious, supports a healthy weight, environmentally sustainable, taking into consideration how food is produced, processed and transported, minimises waste in terms of food waste and packaging, supports ethical systems like fair trade, promotes local food production, so investment in local small and medium-sized enterprises and the wider Camden economy, and is appropriate for the main target group for any particular setting. So we are currently forming these proposed standards around the Soils Association's Food for Life Silver standards, and as these have been shown to be fit for purpose in their use by many other boroughs, and we will adapt them according to the consultation that is taking place in the coming months, along with examples of good practice. So the consultative group is being set up, working in all areas of the council that purchase foods, that's schools, internal meetings, events, holiday activities, 5PS cafe and other venues like libraries, leisure centres and parks. So as mentioned, the standards that we will work with and develop will be worked on through the consultative group, and we would aim to have draft proposals in place by around early February. But specifically for the deputation that we're discussing today, Camden standards will be aiming towards a 50% plant-based target, and from a population health and nutrition perspective, the standards could be significantly reduce the amount of meat being consumed. Alongside such a change, it's important to focus on optimizing nutrition, including reducing levels of food high in fat, sugar and salt, as well as levels of ultra-processed food that's been discussed already. So getting the balance right on these issues is critical for population health, environment and well-being. So there is an opportunity, I think, for us to develop together the conversation that we've been having today around the Camden food buying standards, which in early 2024 will be developed by the organisation.
Great, thank you, Richard. Sounds very positive.
Yeah, that sounds really positive. I think I really agree, and I think I can sort of hear the wider points about what you're trying to do to encourage your residents in terms of their eating habits. I think the only thing that concerns me is the kind of the fact that, to be honest, we're here again. I mean, before I spoke in the council chambers about a month ago, I think there was a deputation beforehand, and it feels like there's a lot of good words, but not necessarily a lot of action. And I feel like the push towards a 50% commitment, I don't really see why that couldn't be 100%. We're saying we're pushing towards this, we're aiming towards this. It's not saying this has to happen now. Obviously, that's kind of our position in that we could do that at our internal meetings and events. I sort of don't understand why we're going halfway when things are really drastic. It's already the position of the UK government that we are in a climate emergency. So I kind of feel like drastic action needs to combat drastic events, basically.
I mean, Richard, on that point of 50%, you kind of mentioned that we'd have to have a balanced approach to the way we set our catering and our general offering. Do you just want to kind of clarify that point a bit more?
Yes, I think that's a working aim of the food buying standards. But those food buying standards is about all food that the council buys. That's across schools, as Sam highlighted, internal meetings and events, but holiday activity clubs, 5PS cafe and other venues as well. So it's broader, I think, than probably the focus of the deputation. Therefore, as has been discussed by members around the table, if you aggregate sort of action across those sort of 5 or 6 areas of where main areas where we purchase food, I think to the team working on this, it feels like a stretch, that 50%, and something for us to sort of aim at to begin this work. Because the food buying standards, as I say, and that is wrapped up in that 50% comes from that. So I guess we need to. It's about the full buying capacity of Camden around food. What I would also say, just on the point raised by Councillor Kirk on how many events, what are these events. Internal meeting, we don't do a lot of catering for internal meetings. We don't provide a lot of food necessarily. The event service broadly as well is an income-based service, so it works within a market in central London to provide event space in Camden. So that I'm just putting that there. It's not just internal meetings. The event service can be very broad. And as you mentioned, Chair, if someone is coming in to hire some of our venues and wants to bring in their own caterers, they bring in their own caterers. So it's perhaps from an events management perspective, that leverage to a degree falls away sometimes.
Do committee members have questions to Richard?
Just, I think, like, to give a steer, I think it makes sense to do things which are within our control. We wouldn't want the council to lose any revenue from holding events, because we're obviously in this desperate times. The more events we hold, the more and rent out for external revenues. So perhaps let's direct officers to take this forward in things we control that are within our gift. So council-run events to trial it in the first. And I like Nina's suggestion of aiming for January, and that hopefully gives the deputation something tangible that we can hold us to account for in future. And then exploring the schools as well. I think that's just important. I just want to make sure we're not CSF. I'd like to have the right people. I don't think about schools all the time.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that I think the target sets sound realistic. There are a lot of different settings, a lot of different venues, and there are commercial aspects, and I absolutely see all of that. If it were meaningful, I would be very happy to support, on a gesture basis, having pure Camden internal meetings, time-based. But I think it is. I think it's totally meaningless. The mayor making, we get a sandwich, and if it's a hummus sandwich rather than a cheese sandwich, I'm not sure that's really the global change that you're looking for. If that's the extent of what we're discussing in the strict terms of the deputation, we don't want to go any further, then I'm supportive.
Sharon?
I was just going to come back to what Rishi was saying, and much as I'd like to agree about January, I would imagine as an ex-venue manager, the booking for the food is already going to be made, so to try and put something in 2 weeks is going to be impossible.
Or announce it then, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I'm understanding. Yeah.
So just one by one, would you? Nina.
I think more does need to be. We need to do more. Basically, we all need to do more. We are in an absolute crisis, and it's only going to get worse. So we have to consider all these things that we've spoken about, but we are in a crisis and we need to do more. I think Camden should lead the way. I think Camden Council is quite good at that, in terms of leaning on different, leading in terms of being the first council to do things in different ways, and addressing climate crisis locally, but also globally. So I think it'd be good if we can support that all internal events are plant-based on behalf of Camden Council, if that is possible. If we can do that in a trial way, but then hopefully then that trial can show that it is doable, and then we can commit to that. And even though it is maybe not that we don't have many internal events, but it still shows that Camden is doing something, and then other councils can look towards it who maybe do have more internal events, and then may also go towards being more plant-based. So I think it creates a domino effect if we also do that. Maybe our neighbouring councils, Barnet and Westminster, etc., might follow suit. So yeah.
Sorry, Rishi, could you just remind me your recommendation?
That we go forward aspiration to trial all our internal events, and then explore the feasibility in schools and understand what that would look like with people who are more expert. We have no schools in Finsbury, so can't speak on behalf of the education experts. And then maybe that's it. But plant-based options,
make people have to choose something else. I mean, it's just an easy win in that way.
Sorry, I think you've all more or less said the same thing.
I think we are very much saying the same thing. I'm not. I don't think I would support imposing plant-based on all schools. I think that would be extremely problematic. I certainly wouldn't support cutting off revenue streams for event organisers who wanted to provide catering. So I think we very much agree. And I'm not sure that anything we say after that is hugely meaningful. But leaving that aside, I'm very happy to support it.
I'd actually like to see a report back on this and essentially how we should read.
With samples, Chair. Yeah.
Do you have to provide again? Or?
An officer system.
One final thing, if it's okay. I just wanted to wholeheartedly agree with Nina with your point. I just think it is a really easy win for you guys. I accept it might be a gesture because internal meetings and events don't necessarily have so much catering. But I think in terms of showcasing your commitment towards a better, greener future, I think it's an enormous win to just publicise. This is what we're committing to. This is what we're showing to our residents and what we can do. The schools wasn't mentioned at all in our deputation, but I wanted to engage with that because I think it is an important point. We're not saying we're going to completely change people's diets in schools. We're not saying that at all. But I do think there's a really kind of politically easy win that could very easily be had just in terms of the action that we can take right now.
I have to say, actually, because of the sorts of meetings I go to, plant-based catering is the norm. At the meetings I've been to where anyone's giving me any food, Power Up North London, and I mean, all those sorts of organisations, it always is. So it's a sensible direction.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so quite a few things there. I think we've taken note of it. Adam, just want to, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, just wrap this up, especially around the opt-out options at schools. In full council, we talked about the opt-out for meat-free Mondays, and most schools have stayed in and are doing meat-free Mondays. So that's been a big success. And I think the idea of a trial is a really good one. It kind of will take that particular policy while doing all the other work on food security and standards and so on. Great. So I think ultimately we've endorsed your deputation.
Be honest, was it the meringues?
Sorry. Yeah. Well, we're not going to say you bought us off, but it was very nice. Thank you so much for the compliments there. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, the committee is 100% behind this. We've fully endorsed your deputation, and I think this isn't the end of it. We'll continue kind of scrutinising this and monitoring this and see how the council delivers on this going forward, so you don't have to keep making deputation. Please do come back to this committee at some point in the future, just kind of do a health check on where things are. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So could the minutes also reflect thank you to Kevin and your partner? And
thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I would quite like to try out those cookies.
Yeah, we can leave these and circulate. Right? Set to go.